Hello, everyone. Today we'll start talking about Descartes' meditation number 3. Meditation number 1, demolition project, undermine the reliability of the senses and the beliefs based on the senses. Meditation number 2, start building the edifice of knowledge upon the certain foundation, a foundation of knowledge that cannot be doubted. And here's what we get at the end of meditation 2. Descartes knows that despite the presence of an evil demon, he knows with certainty that he exists because he's thinking. And he knows with certainty that thought exists, that his thoughts exist because he's thinking. Not even an evil demon can deceive him of that. The evil demon can deceive only to the extent that there's a mismatch between Descartes' experience and the way the world is. That is the gap that is exploited by the thought experiment of the evil demon. The experience need not match reality, need not correspond to reality. It can be a hallucination or something like that. But there's still some things Descartes knows, that he exists because he's doubting, he's thinking, and that he has the experiences that he has. All of his experiences he knows with certainty. So here's the things that we know with certainty at the end of meditation 2. The Cartesian mind, the mind that is discoverable by itself, is active, is thinking. It's very the very thing that defines it is its ability to think. In fact, at some points he says it is thought itself. The mind has several faculties: intellect, will, imagination, and sensory perception. All of the things that are immediately accessible within the inner theater of experience. Thinking, thus, is a general category that includes understanding, affirming, denying, doubting, imagining, willing, and even sensing. So experience is a much better kind of category for our contemporary senses. It's a very generic category. Sometimes it uses ideas or perceptions or thoughts interchangeably to mean any of the items that are immediately accessible to the mind upon introspection, any of the elements within experience. Importantly, thoughts are immediately accessible to the mind. They're not the kinds of things that the evil demon can deceive one about. One may be deceived about whether or not, here's the cook-up again, we have the experience of the cook-up. The evil demon can deceive me about whether or not there is a cup, whose experience I'm having. I'm having an experience of the cup. That's a mental thing. And maybe there's no cup. There's no extra mental thing that the experience corresponds to. But not even the evil demon can deceive me about my having or not having the experience. I know immediately whether I'm having or I'm not having the experience of the cup. That the evil demon cannot deceive me about. So experiences are transparent. It is not possible to doubt having the experience. So that's the basic sketch of the end of meditation 2. And 2 major questions arise out of this. Is there a mind independent of the self and the thoughts of the self? And crucially, if there is such a world independent of the mind and the thoughts of the self, does it correspond to, does it match my ideas of it? Is there a cup that matches, that resembles my experience of the cup, my ideas or thoughts or perceptions of the cup? How do I know those things? That's the end of meditation 2. And meditation 3 onward is trying to prove, under the constraints of methodological doubt, that we can come to know that there is a mind-independent world that does match our experiences. But now it's no longer the naive trusting of the senses. Now it's using reason to ground the credibility of the senses. So here's what begin of meditation 3. And my quote, and my principal task in this place is to consider, in respect to those ideas which appear to me to proceed from certain objects outside of me, what are the reasons which causes me to think they're similar objects, them similar to objects, sorry. So that's not the most clear way of articulating a thought, but the thought is, the point of this quote is, so I look at a cup, I have a perception of a cup, I form the idea of the cup, and how do I know, this quote is asking, that there is a cup, mind independent, a thing that is not just my experience of the cup, but the thing that my experience is an experience of? Is there a cup that is mind independent, physical, independent of my mind, that matches, that is similar to, that is resembled by my experience of it? Is there a thing in the real world that matches my experience That's the main question. And here are the two main questions again for meditation 3 onward. Is there a mind-independent world to which my ideas correspond? And are my ideas similar to, or they resemble those objects in the external world? So is there something out there other than my mind? Question number one. Question number two, if there is, does it match my experience? Is my experience a good guide to it? And I have here a picture of a window. Remember, empiricists say the senses are windows onto the world. Let's take that metaphor seriously. So here is a way of understanding what is happening in Descartes. Think of the window as the experience given to you by sensation. And it's an experience of something mind-independent, a mountain, you know, some hills, bushes, trees in this case. But now we're very aware. I mean, Descartes has made us very aware that the window itself is not just transparently seeing reality as it is. The window itself, the experience, is the product of your sensory apparatus, your brain, your eyes, and them operating on information. So the window, the glass, is what enables us to see the thing outside the real world, the mind-independent world. But now there's a legitimate question. Is the window distorting, changing, or even making up something on the other side? Is what the window seeming to reveal to us about the other side, is that thing really there? Is the window being faithful to what's on the other side of the window? Is there something on the other side of the window? And if so, does it match with the window? Is the information we're getting by the window? Those are the questions for meditation 3. Here are reasons for thinking, like naive starting point reasons for thinking that there is such a thing. And here's a cool new picture. Notice that it's a two-sided window and one of the sides is open. The side that is closed is supposed to represent exactly what I've said before. You still have the glass, and the glass is the experience, and it's an experience of, in this case, the ocean. So you have an experience of the ocean. That's the right side of this picture. The left side is open. And the thought is, oh, here we're seeing reality as it is. There's no longer merely my experience of reality, but that's reality as it is in itself, independently of my experience. That's how it looks when God looks. That's a different way of putting it. That's how it really is. Those are the real, true properties of the mind-independent world. And notice that they match, right? The window that is open, that is just revealing reality as it is, matches the window that is closed. So the window that is closed, we know if we're looking through that window, that the glass is not distorting reality. The glass is delivering reality as it is. And we know that because right next to it is reality as it is, right? So reality as it is in the left, there's no window to distort it. And the way we actually experience this on the right, there's a window. But this picture illustrates that there's no distortion. Our experience just is an experience of reality as it is. So question for us, is that how it is? Is that how the world is? Is that how our experience functions? Does our sensory experience give us a faithful and adequate picture of reality, such that the way it seems to us when we're experiencing it is the way that it is? Here are reasons for thinking so. So one reason for thinking so, says Descartes, it is natural to think so. Nature teaches me to think so. In the thinking so, it's again, I have an experience of a cup, right? There's the window, the experience, that is the fabrication, the result of my sensory apparatus, eyes, brain, and working on information. And it is natural to go from I have the experience of the cup to believing there is a real cup there. So it is natural transition from I experience the cup to there is a cup in the real world. Or it's natural to go from I have an experience that something to the world is such that something is there. My experience is veridical. It's true. So it's natural to do that. We do it all the time. In fact, before you read Descartes, you were doing it, without thinking. Now you have to take a step back and question whether or not that's a reliable move. And here's Descartes elaborates on what he means by this. When I say that I'm so much instructed by nature, that is to trust experiences, I merely mean a certain spontaneous inclination which impels me to believe in this connection. It is hard for me not to believe that there's a cup in the midst of having the experience of the cup. Though I'm very aware, following Descartes, that what I have is the experience of the cup, and that's the thing that I cannot doubt. But it's also very natural to say, well, there's the cup too, which is causing my experience. And that's all that Descartes means. He does not mean that the natural light. Remember, that's a technical term that he uses to mean reason operating properly, that grasps and understands reality as it is. It doesn't mean that. It's not that. It's just this natural propensity or inclination to trust your experience. That is the foundation of empiricism. So this is, again, the empiricist picture. That's reason number one for trusting the senses. Reason number two, these ideas or perceptions of the deliverance of the senses do not depend upon my will. It is very different when I experience the cup than when I imagine, say, a little lamp. If I imagine a tiny little lamp at the rightmost corner of my visual field, there it is. I can imagine it into existence. I can will it into existence. And there is the image, the imaginary image. And then I can just change it, right? It can become a dinosaur, cool dinosaur, or, an elephant or something else, right? I can just will the content of my imagination. And my imagination, the sensory kind of imagery of my imagination, follows my will. It obeys my will to some extent. It is very different with a cup. If I open my eyes, there it is. I can try to will it out of existence, but it refuses to do so, right? It imposes itself upon me. The deliverances of the senses do not obey my will. They force themselves upon me, and I open my eyes, there they are. And as much as I will for them not to be there, like I will my imaginary objects, they fail to comply with my will. So perhaps that's a reason for thinking, well, I didn't make it up, right? Like there is a real cup there that is causing my experience. But Descartes thinks none of those reasons are good enough. Remember, we're looking after certain knowledge, a knowledge that cannot be doubted, something that serves as the foundation for the whole edifice of knowledge. And neither of those reasons are strong enough. Here's the reply to one. Sometimes it is natural to choose the easy path, even if it is evil. That it is natural and easy to believe something does not mean that it's true. It's not a mark of truth that it is natural and easy. In fact, many times the easy path is the wrong path, as you parents, I'm sure, have told you wisely. So it is foolish to trust this natural inclination for truth when we're after absolute certainty, when we're looking for the kind of knowledge that can not be doubted. This reason is just not good enough. It is faulty. We have experiences of the past of taking the easy path and then it being mistaken. So that it is easy and natural to trust your experience is just not a sufficient ground for thinking that they are, in fact, reliable. Here's a reply to 2 about the experiences not being subject to the will. That ideas do not depend upon my will is not good enough. I mean, we're trying to attain absolute certainty, knowledge that cannot be doubted. For it is still possible that there's within me another faculty that produces their experiences without them matching reality. That's the whole point of the evil demon and the dreaming experiment. So when you're dreaming, things are not subject to your will, and yet they're not real, right? They're just dreams. And likewise, the thought experiment for the evil demon, the experiences fed into your mind by the evil demon were not the result of your will, and yet they were faulty, they were deceptive. So that something's not up to your will and an experience is not up to your will is not a mark of its truth. That's a basic mistake. So none of these reasons for thinking that sensory experiences are reliable, none of them is good enough. Certainly not in the context of methodological doubt, of the evil demon hypothesis, of the search for absolute knowledge. So what is good enough? What can prove that our senses are reliable? Here's Descartes' actual plan for proving this. The first step is to prove that God exists. And Descartes has the following idea of God, and here's why he thinks that proving that God exists is the way out of this skeptical scenario. Quote, I understand the supreme God, eternal, infinite, immutable, omniscient, omnipotent, and creator of all things which are outside of himself, other than God. Crucially, Descartes continues, this idea of God is so very clear and distinct Since all that I can conceive clearly and distinctly of the real and true, and of that which can convey some perfection, is then entirely contained in this idea. So it's not as clear of a statement, but the point is that we have ideas of perfections, knowledge, power, things like that, wisdom, virtue. And those are perfections. They make the thing that has them better off than they would be without them. Someone who's knowledgeable is better off than someone who's ignorant. Someone who's wise is better off than someone who's foolish. Someone who's more powerful is better off than someone who's weak, and so on. And better off in the sense of having more, they're better versions of themselves. They have more perfection. They have more greatness, in some sense of greatness, goodness, and the generic sense of goodness. And Descartes is pointing out, we have an idea. Each of us has, or at least can come up with an idea of putting all of the perfections together and thinking of the one being that has them all to the maximal degree. That is the idea of God. And we begin with the idea of God. We all have it. It's clear and distinct. The being that has all perfections to a maximum degree. And the first description gives you a sense of the result of fleshing out what it is to have all perfections. And that is our idea of God. That doesn't prove that there's a God, but it does give us access to something within the skeptical worry, within the skeptical scenario, within the limits of meditation to just knowing yourself and your thoughts. It gives us a thought that is immediately accessible to us to start working with to prove the existence of God. And remember, everything from now onward has to be, the establishment of the foundations has to be done by the rules of methodological doubt so that we make sure that whatever we build is absolutely certain. So once God's existence has been proven, it would follow very straightforwardly that there is no such evil demon. That's not even possible because that is incompatible with God. God wouldn't allow such an evil demon because God is good. God is omnipotent. He's all-powerful. So he would not allow such an evil demon. Third, so we can disregard the evil demon hypotheses. And third, because God is the creator, he's the one that made us. And he is good, he wouldn't want us to be deceived. So we can trust that our senses are reliable, at least to the extent that they enable us to function in society and so on. So we can trust our senses as reliable by knowing that God exists and by knowing that God created us in such a way that he wants us to do well. And if he wants us to do well, then he wouldn't give us deceptive or faulty sensory apparatus. He will give us good enough sensory apparatus for them to capture reality, and so we can function within it. So this is much like when you buy a car and then you want to know what kind of fuel to put in. You go to the menu and you read, and it says, "Oh, use this. You use gasoline, typical gasoline." You can just go and put the gas, right? Once you read the manual that it says, "Oh, use gasoline," you don't have to actually understand the inner kind of system, the motor, how it works. You don't have to understand the mechanics of the car to know that, in fact, gasoline is the right thing. You just need to know that who made them, the authors of the manual, want you, the consumer, to trust the car, to be happy with the car. They want to treat you well so you can buy more cars and tell your friends so they can buy the cars. Right? You can understand enough of the makers of the thing and their good intentions with regards to the instructions for the car. So you can just go from the, I know the makers, I know enough about the makers to know that the instructions will be reliable. And then you just read the instructions and then you follow the instructions. Something like that is happening, Descartes thinks, with our sensory capacities. We know God exists, he's going to argue. God is good, we know that, he's going to argue. And he made us, so he wants us to do well. So he would not have given us faulty sensory perceptions or apparatus. So this is his way out. I like this painting of Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel. This actually, you can see part of the sun. This is the painting of the Genesis when God is creating the earth, creating the light, creating the sun and the light. So he's actually pointing to and bringing into existence with his finger. He's bringing, willing into existence the light. But I like this picture because it looks like a superhero, right? A superhero coming to the rescue. It's God to the rescue. And that's exactly the role that God plays in Descartes. Descartes puts forth all of these arguments that dig himself into this deep skeptical worry, but then God becomes kind of the hero that rescues Descartes from the skeptical worry. You might have hoped that the way out of skeptical worry was not mediated by God. If you have questions, worries about that that trajectory, that's not Descartes' way out. Descartes' way out is this: it is through God. It is God that comes that rescues the capacity for knowing mind-independent reality. Descartes seems to be committed to claiming that unless we know God exists, we cannot trust that our senses and our reason are capable of grasping reality beyond the immediate sense of experience. And he doesn't like that. That's skepticism. That's not knowing anything about the world. So it is God that comes and helps vindicate the reliability of the senses. But now it's based on a firm foundation. Now it's not merely naively trusting the senses, it's knowing with certainty that you exist, that your thoughts exist, that God exists, and that God created you in a particular way, such that you can trust the senses. So trusting the senses becomes the conclusion of an elaborate argument whose premises you know with certainty, Descartes argues. So let's stop here and let's look at the arguments next time. See ya.